All right, here we go. It is Thursday, February 25th. On the John Riggins Show, the month has just flown by. Hard to imagine. We're finally getting a little warmer weather up in here. We're going to get into all kinds of stuff involving the Washington football team, the soap opera, the drama that just keeps on giving. Here's Riggo.
Yeah, Todd, it's been that way for a long time, but I'm here. I'm a little distraught this morning, Todd. I didn't tell you right off the bat when I came in, but do you realize my ice machine broke down?
No.
Yeah.
What great ice.
Let me tell you, nobody knows until you get one just how what do you want? What's the right word? Just how vital it is to have an ice machine. And I am lost without it. Although I'm able to make a little bit of ice enough to get by, but it's like I got to go down and spend an hour with the ice machine. It's almost like I got to go milk the cow. Get the ice. Okay, I got the ice. I'll bring it up now and put it in there. Yeah, I cleaned it. Did a typical cleaning. Fired up, and all of a sudden it. And I mean, it's a pretty simple thing to clean. So, I've been working with it. I called the factory. They were trying to walk me through some stuff. Of course, I'm a crack expert when it comes to refrigeration.
Oh, that. Many talents.
Oh, God.
Electricity.
Like, he starts talking about stuff, and I'm going, well, I'm thinking it's looking more and more like I'm going to have to make another phone call, and that's to a service tech. Get him out. And that's kind of what I'm down to. I might make one last fling at it, but
like you got those good ice cubes.
Oh, yeah. It's gourmet ice.
Yeah, see, I love eating and crunching ice. I always have, and they say that's like a sign of anemia and probably other afflictions.
I don't know about that.
But yeah, and
anemia.
So but I always have, and like Chick-fil-A has the best ice. It's very similar to your cubes.
But you couldn't. If one just pops out of that freezer, there ain't no way you're going to chew on that thing. You can't hardly get it in your mouth.
Yeah,
they're just a shade under 2 inches, and they're kind of cylindrical, but there's a little bit of a taper to them. But I want to tell you, it's really weird, too, because when I first was looking at ice machines, there's a lot of good ice machines out there, and different sized ones. But gourmet ice caught my eye, and, of course, at the time, it's very popular in bars. So much so that there are people that actually make gourmet ice and sell it to the bar industry. In other words, they bake it and bring it in. So, they're huge cubes that they can put. People that like a bourbon on the rocks, you get 1 cube of ice with your bourbon on it. And if it's if the ice is done correctly, it melts so slowly it doesn't water the drink down. See, that's the problem when you get, when they put a bunch of ice in there with smaller cubes, you got a watery drink.
I can't believe you just brought this up here on Ice Talk because last night at one of my favorite watering holes, American Prime, and the bartender was training a new young lassie behind a bar, and they have those cubes, and so you get your bourbon, and she. And the great cubes, exactly what you speak of.
Nice,
and she says, and of course we charge them for the cube. And I said, and I did one of these. I said, what?
Yeah, you charge for the ice.
So I've been here for 3 years. I'm like going, you guys have always charged me for the large cube. I go, oh yeah.
Well, if they just added in the drink, you don't think about, well, what is $10? You're really going to go, oh, let's break this down, will you? Or let's see, how much was it for the glass to be washed and dried? Got that? You know what I'm saying? Goes on and on. By the way, we're talking about ice. That reminds me. Years ago, I had this great idea. I was fishing up in Resurrection Bay right outside of Seward, Alaska. And that's an area where there's a lot of glaciers that calve into the water. And we got real close to one. It was probably a quarter of a mile away. You wouldn't want to be right up on it because when it goes in, it creates a little tsunami. If you're in a smaller boat, it could be a problem. But I got to thinking, and, they were telling me, and it makes sense, that first of all, that ice, they're saying, it's about 50,000 years old. That's kind of interesting.
Wow, yeah.
But then on top of that, that ice that comes out of a glacier is so much denser than any ice that we can make here. And when you think about it, when you think about water pressure and how it works, the Mariana Trench, what is it, like 7 miles deep, something like that, 35 or some thousand feet deep out over in the Pacific Ocean someplace. You get down there that low, the pressure will crush you, right? That's I think it's something like that. You got to, because that's what gives you bends and all this stuff where you're coming up too fast. But I would think, I always thought about, I'm going to bring this back. Wouldn't this be a great, like you said, at the bar, not that, where you can say, oh, I'm going to give you a piece of ice here. The ice would be there tomorrow afternoon. You pour it out and set it in a glass. And
remarkable.
It won't, it wouldn't melt.
This is from the permafrost. And
all right, where do you want to go? We're done with our
let's
ice
go
talk.
From one trench to another. Let's go out to the pit that is in Ashburn, and the truly the soap opera that just
now. Which one? There's two that I can think of, and we're going to cover both. Well, where do you want to go first?
Let's save Alex Smith for second.
Okay.
Let's get into the story that came out. This is called Front Office Sports, and the gentleman AJ Perez, and they do a nice job of reporting, because a couple of things that are still hanging out there in the balance is the report from the NFL. Roger Goodell mentioned over probably about a week and a half ago now that basically it's done, it's being wrapped up, and they got their findings and they make the presentation. And he kind of went out there, was leading off of first base a little bit, saying how Dan and Tanya have done a really nice job of basically correcting the sins of the past. Mm-hmm. So this report comes out because Snyder it's in an Indian court in New Delhi, mm-hmm. and part of a humongous filing out there where he basically is saying the Dwight Scharr, so his minority partners led by Dwight Scharr, had some defamatory statements and were basically a hostile takeover, if you will. And John Moog, who is the founder of Moog and Company, and John has been involved in the business of sports forever. Based out of Baltimore, and some of the permutations that we find out in this court filing that one Bruce Allen, it looks like he flipped and went rogue and was maybe part of the hostile takeover with the minority partners relative to the fact that he had, I forget how many phone calls, 80 different phone calls, something amounted to like 22 hours worth of phone calls to John Moog in Baltimore around the time where things were getting a little sideways with the partners. So, they're trying to, the league does not want this being played out publicly like it is. They hate this type of stuff. So within this context, you learn that they're going after Scharr. Bruce Allen has been exposed as to that he clearly went to the other side or was playing both sides and trying to figure out who was going to end up. And Jeff Bezos, then he's the third part of this story, where he had contact, or Moog had contact with one of Bezos' contact. It's not sure who contacted whom first.
Right.
But all roads lead back to the fact that one Danny boy was vulnerable, and the vultures were circling, and he dug in his heels, and the soap opera continues to play itself out.
Now, let me ask you another question, because I believe you sent some other information out yesterday, how the Washington football team has now become, is the right word, diversified football franchise, or possibly professional sports franchise in the entire country.
They're winning all the awards now for their diversity and their inclusionary, and so all of this was done right before our face, and we talked about it last year because it was real, and as Snyder is wont to do, he overdoes it times 10 by, you guys never had a general manager. Well, now we got 3. Actually,
4.
Well, we have 4 in the player personnel department, but 3 used to be GMs. Oh yeah, well, we don't have enough minorities. We're going to hire everybody, and so that's what they've done. And this is,
how many Asians have they hired?
Oh, I'm sure they're on the staff. Okay. I'm sure we've got every box.
American, Native Americans.
Yeah, I'm sure we got every box checked.
Okay.
I'm sure we got every box.
How about checks? I'm partial to checks.
I don't know if we checked on the checks.
Yeah, I don't know if that box is
checked.
Okay, all right, Todd. Well, there's a couple things going on here that I see. One is, I think actually, John Moog very well may be, what was it, the George Clooney character in Michael Clayton?
Yeah.
Yeah, he might be the fixer. At least that, I think, is the role he's playing here. But, you mentioned, I think it was last week, about, the league is going to come up with some kind of punishment for some of the behavior that the football team displayed in the last year, and or goes back further. The cheerleader situation, where now Gloria Allred has finally come. She represented, I think it was I don't know. Is that enough people to have a class action?
Well, it was 12 to 15.
Okay,
what
so
I saw.
She had a contingency of of cheerleaders that on the best pits. What were they called? Best bits, or what was it? The name of the actual tape. Do you remember? that was created for.
Oh, yeah, something like the best bits, outtakes, and they were zooming in with the
that had some nudity and all this stuff of people who didn't know this was going on to begin with. But you talk about how the league may take draft choices away, and I'm thinking that seems insane to me. That here's a franchise that's floundered for 20 years. It's had a moment or two here, but for the most part, they're not the New York Jets, but they live on the same block.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the Cleveland Browns have finally pulled themselves out of the morass. I thought about it, and this morning it occurred to me, and I'm saying this part tongue-in-cheek, but there's a little bit of truth to it, really, if you want to get down to it and really make the landscape better for everybody. I would say because of the tremendous effort by Mr. and Mrs. Snyder to really diversify and bring their franchise, their corporation up to speed and be the model for everybody. What's left, Todd? What is left?
The fact that they have done this?
No. What's left is,
the window
what's left?
The window dressing is there. Is it real? Is it?
Here's how you prove it to everybody. And the league, it makes everybody look like a shining star. The league can either step in or behind the channels that Mr. and Mrs. Snyder are going to step down as owners of the football team, and they are going to find a black organization and or some very wealthy black people, and they are in this country
100%.
to buy the franchise. They could do a deal where they still hold on to a minority interest, but you talk about a punishment. If you really want and make fans happy, you want to make everybody and do the right thing here. This is a perfect opportunity for the think tank up in New York City on Madison Avenue. I don't know if they're still there anymore. Or not Madison Avenue, Park Avenue, for them to really look at this and start some serious conversation as to how this can all come about. I think it solves all the problems, because not only it actually puts the Snyders in such a great light, if you ask me, and that is that they do become true philanthropists and they do become heroes, and they'll cease to be vilified in this town because they realize, or Mr. Snyder realizes that I don't have the chops for this, and I'm going to hand it off to somebody and give somebody else a chance. And I would like to still be associated with the team, but I now have a minority voice, and I will sit back and enjoy what goes on the football field, and we'll see what happens from there. But I think this would be the first, and like I said, on so many levels, politically speaking, of course, that you have black ownership of the Washington franchise, the one that Bobby Mitchell stepped in and became, the focal point.
Last franchise to integrate.
The last franchise becomes the first franchise to actually integrate ownership. Beautiful. I will now stand. Oh, you can give me a standing ovation if you'd like. I don't see.
It's beautiful. It's
part tongue in cheek because we know that's never going to happen.
Well, of course,
but reality tells you for somebody to think about that and go, wow. That would solve a lot of ills right here. I mean, and it would fire up the franchise base, the fan base. I would have to believe that people would jump, just the fact that, that the ownership is handing it off to another group would make a lot of people very happy. It also would make the whole thing that we're talking about here with the minority owners now who were wanting to sell their team, but current ownership was stood in the way of that. But current ownership, and this is what's interesting, I think I was talking to my wife about this. This team's valued about, what, $3 billion, something like that?
Closer to $4.
$4 billion. Okay, so that would mean that in the right world, wouldn't you, if you were big and tough and had a 300-foot yacht, a 100-yard yacht, whatever it is, well, you could probably just go, well, actually, I don't have it on me, but I'm going to run down to the bank and I'll be back with that $1.5 billion and pay you guys off, and we're good, right?
Yeah.
And now I become, king ring-a-ding for sure. Ain't nobody getting in my way.
Highly leveraged.
Why isn't that happening?
Highly leveraged.
Because you go to the cupboard and just like old Mother Hubbard, it's bare, right? So, like I said, I honestly think that you can laugh and go, you laugh because well, that ain't the way the world works. These people, they're out to make money, that and they want the glory. They want to wrap themselves in all the glory and all this stuff. So That isn't going to happen. But if you want to follow the path that's being laid out for you by this franchise as being a leader in the what do you call it, inclusionary and the diversity and all this stuff, this is the natural progress, the natural conclusion to all this, is to now turn the ownership over to a minority group. I mean, honestly,
in a capitalist society, in a capitalist business, and while I love your plan, I love your much as I hate saying outside the box thinking, it makes a lot of sense. But what is more likely to happen? I don't see.
Oh yeah, you can go ahead.
I don't see him selling.
I got an umbrella on because I knew it was going to rain. But I mean, and if you want to pee on it, that's fine too.
No, because it makes tremendous
too much sense.
And especially with the league that is 75% of the performers are African Americans, and the fact that, for most professional sports leagues, the lack of minority ownership is a problem, which speaks to the capitalism. A more likely scenario is when you got guys like Jeff Bezos who can say, Dan, I know you don't want to sell. And let's say, Dan, you say it's worth $4.5 billion. I tell you what, Dan, I'm going to give you $10 billion. Now go to your yacht, run away, and we'll take it from here. Because that's walking around money to a guy like Jeff Bezos. Somebody's going to have to overpay in a tremendous way to get Dan's attention. Because I don't see the league forcing him. I do think that you have to punish him because this is 20 years of malfeasance.
Well, this is my point, though. Why, you've got, this is one of the flagship franchises, right? And they have been, I don't know, is the word disgraced? I don't know if they
tarnished.
Huh?
It's tarnished.
Tarnished, exactly. And not to mention the fact that the ineptitude on the field has certainly eroded, their status among the consumers, the fans, I would guess. I mean, their own fans. They do a heck of a job. You got to give them credit for that, always coming back with a, we're new and improved marketing campaign. That never failed. And, it's more, it isn't fans like, I think fans that watch the teams that I played on back in those days, I'm talking about people that were in their, let's just say they were were teenagers, kind of like you.
Yeah.
That they've moved on, but they're all continually marketing to the millennials, and now what is it, Generation Z or Gen Zen or whatever it's called, Gen Z,
X,
Gen X.
That's just it, John, because you're right.
And
people
and females.
40 and above, and by every metric, the TV ratings, how bad they are. We knew the in-game attendance pre-pandemic was a joke. So they realized this is a franchise in crisis that was in a death spiral. And so now the culmination of all of this, 20-plus years. So they're going to bring the pain for all that they've done in the last year with the window dressing to say, hey, we're look league. They're trying to minimize what's coming their way, I believe. And that what's going to be.
You're talking about the ownership right now?
The NFL coming out with them because to make this go away, once again, you're on our radar. Mm-hmm. You keep putting these turds that we got to deal with because your malfeasance and bad behavior. And so I think there's going to be hefty fines and potential draft picks taken. They're going to bring the pain, which might, again, make him scratch his head knowing that there's the Jeff Bezos and other people out there that would scoop this up in a heartbeat, because this is a really tough club to get into now, is being an NFL owner.
All right, but you know what? It's not impossible because you never know, and it really gets down to it's all behind closed doors, and nobody will really ever know what was dug up and what's going to be shared with the public. But for whatever reason, they had smoking guns in Carolina with Jerry Richardson, and 100. So he was bounced almost immediately. And so,
he also decided not to fight it.
And it's not, well, that's true too. And he was at that age. He's figuring,
I'm going to ride off to the sunset. They're going to judge me for a couple of this and my body of work. I ain't putting up with that.
He didn't need the aggravation of going through a what do you call a protracted court situation. So that you're right. That would make that unique, because I don't believe. I mean, it's unrealistic what I said. But on the one hand, this is what makes it so disingenuous. Because you're trying to show, it's almost like a kid. It is exactly like a kid that just got in trouble. They went outside and they rolled around in the mud, and their mom told them, whatever you do, don't get off the sidewalk. And you come in with dirty clothes, right? And so now what are we going to do? Well, there's going to be a punishment. So what's it going to be? You're going to have to sit in the corner for 30 minutes, or what is it going to be? But you're not going to come in here with these dirty clothes because I told you not to do it, and yet you went ahead and did it anyway. You contested my authority. So, that's what you... So what does the child do? The child goes around and starts dusting the furniture,
right.
Carpeting the rug.
Out
on
of character.
And just like, okay, am I good now? Are we okay now? Am I out of trouble now?
Now the third time
you so childish. And for me, to see this, what do you call it, foisted on the public, and for the league to go, look, the model for... I'm going... You people completely miss it. There has to be real pain. There has to be a pound of flesh withdrawn here, and the way you do it is that you implement new ownership. And like I said, I'm not being a bad guy here. I think current ownership can stay involved at a minor level, but I think, and really, this part does make sense. You take you take away the one thing that really has killed this franchise for the last 20 years, impulsive decisions. And by making somebody, putting them in a minority capacity, you take that away so that they can't go, well, hey, I want to draft Dwayne Haskins, and forget what you people say. We're drafting Dwayne Haskins. You would eliminate that. I mean, it's like I said, it makes too much sense. Plus, you still retain some equity in the team. In other words, if the team does get up, and if in fact, whatever, this doesn't work out, it goes to the next iteration. But I mean, like you said, it's like Lisa Marie told me this morning. She goes, "Oh, that sounds great, but if you're going to talk logic in the NFL, you might as well leave now."
Well,
there's nothing logic. It's all window dressing.
We're dismissing the makeup, the DNA, the personality of the person that's in this position.
Well, that's my point. If you're really contrite, you almost take it upon yourself if you look at the league the way the league would like everybody to look at it, like this entity that's almost like right between here and heaven. They're on that pedestal, and you'd go, I have done bad, and I have shamed the league, and I must now go ahead and in ancient Japan
do the honorable thing.
Yes. The honorable thing.
But we're dealing with Eddie Haskell, right? We're dealing with Eddie Haskell.
Yes,
and when he's like, hey, Mrs. Cleaver, aren't you looking lovely today? Get over here,
hey, Commissioner
squirt.
Goodell.
Get over here, squirt.
Did you see what he's... There you go. And, did I tell you? Yeah, we are going to draft that quarterback. Hey, Ron. Yeah. No, Ron.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Look, over here, Ron. Yeah. Read my lips. Yeah. We're not doing that.
Ron, go ask Mike Shanahan.
Yeah.
Go ask Mike Shanahan, who I tell is going to be quarterback. Go ahead.
The biggest question here would be, did Joe Gibbs have his way, or did he have to? I got a feeling there was a meeting of the minds there somehow, because that would have been... Obviously, Joe was completely unique from all the other coaches that have been brought through here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he was left unfettered, that he was allowed to work in solitude and didn't have the...
Well, I know for a fact
on his shoulder
that because Al Saunders and Mr. Greg Williams were the whipping boys. Joe was the untouchable. Remember?
Oh, so that's what everybody went after.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, that's the way the press works, too.
Yeah.
The press. Don't get me started.
So
about
speaking about quarterbacks, that's a perfect segue as we get into the Alex Smith show and the Alex Smith reality show. And so when we talked last week, because Alex is, like I said, he was on Rachel Ray. So for breaking sports news.
There's all kinds of things that he's been doing. Correct?
Yeah. Oh, from 60 Minutes and on me, because he basically he's lobbying for something, whether or not it's to play, whether or not it's to coach, whether or not it's to run for political office.
I think that is the latter is very well maybe, because he's trying to increase his profile.
Yeah, correct? 100%. He wants to be out there. And so the article came out earlier this week in GQ magazine, and it was a bit of a bombshell. And the bombshell in the sense of, and what's fascinating to me about this and knowing you for as long as, and your perspective, and a lot of the guys as quarterbacks, right? They're just cut from a different cloth, and guys of...
They're like NCOs. I told that to Lisa Marie, which is a non-commissioned officer. I don't know the military hierarchy well enough, but they're right in between. You know, on the one hand, you could say they're enlisted, right? They're players. But on the other hand, they're that in between management. They're above all the other players, but they're not really in management. So you tell me what that position is. So they occupy a unique space on a football franchise, the quarterback. And that's completely different territory than anything else. You got management, you got players, and then you've got the quarterback.
And he was one of the golden children that came up through the ranks as a star quarterback at a very young age, #1 overall. I mean, you just go on and
storybook,
and they're cut from a different cloth. But what was intriguing, you get into the mindset, and the more he talks and the more he does this, and the more it's about him. Forget the team, especially a team sport. And the shots that he was taking
let me
at
stop
the
you there and keep that thought. But ultimately, you have to understand when you're playing in professional sports, it is about you. But what you have, when I say about you, it's your career. And you fit into another group, and you have to do your job, regardless of what it is. Sometimes you don't like your job. I've been in this situation because when I became a blocking back for 2 years down here. But you do your job. But ultimately, this is what I do to make a living. So you have to protect yourself. You cannot be surprised by anything that happens to you through management because they see it in a different way and they have all the power. So you have to deal with that. And if you're not, and I don't want to say bright enough, I think Alex Smith is intelligent enough, but if you allow your ego to get involved in this and or your emotions, you got to use your intellect constantly, or I should say your sense of logic constantly to know exactly to keep this playing field as level as you can for your best interest. So go ahead.
Well, and I agree with you 100%, but that's what was telling to me about this interview is he's dissing and is mad at the franchise and the new coaches coming in as if he was entitled or expected. This is one of the most gruesome injuries that nobody's ever come back from.
Well, it developed into that. It didn't start out that way, I don't think. I mean, Theismann had a similar break. And it ended him. But he wasn't playing well at the time. I mean, he was at the end.
And so you got management, and you have to make decisions in the best interest of the football team.
Correct.
And that would not include, if you have a clue as a GM or a player personnel, this guy's physically unable to perform. He's not in our plans. We got to build a team that's in disarray.
Right.
We got this young quarterback. But it was all about him that he is projecting in this article and how they looked at him with 3 eyes when he came in as if, he's the uninvited guest at the party. Well, Alex, surely you understand that. I mean,
there's what we're talking about.
Right. How can you not understand that and accept that? And his quotes... they're like, they were patronizing me. They doubted me. Yeah, it's really nice that you're trying. When I said, I definitely threw a wrench in the team's plan. They didn't see it, didn't want me there, didn't want me to be a part of it, didn't want me to be on the team, the roster, didn't want to give me a chance. Yes, all true. All true. And if you're in the business of winning football games and trying to build a championship team or turn it around, they don't include you, Alex. How can they? Why should they? You'd have to have your head examined if you fit in.
I can't add much to what you just said. I mean, in other words, really, you've said it all. That if you really are, and that starts to show a little bit, well, if you were TB, number 12, well, maybe there would be a little bit different consideration because, this guy's got some serious campaign rhythm. You, my friend, what do you got there? Oak cluster and maybe a couple, what is that, Weeblos from Cub Scouts? Yeah, well, you're not number 12, so that's not, we're not going to, I don't think this is going to work. To think, I get where he's coming from, kind of. Because you read it was really literally the old sitcom with Schneider, One Day at a Time.
Dwayne F. Schneider. Please always remember and never forget.
Anyway, the point is that he had to, that in the beginning when you read this, he didn't really know if he'd ever walk the very things that, normally somewhat and do the things
he was even going to have a leg.
Yeah, amputated, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So you go through all this, and and everybody knows what's going on. They're keeping you up to speed, and you fight back through all this, and somehow you think because you have fought the good fight against this crippling injury, that you deserve to go to the front of the line. And that to me, I don't know if that starts to border on narcissism. I don't know what you'd call it, but that's like, the reality is, you've played, I think at that time, 15 years? He's a 15-year veteran, something like that?
Yeah.
And you're 36 or 37 years old.
He'll be 37
and you've got this leg that looked like, it was stuck into a tree shredder. And then they put it back together, and then they were pulling parts off. And literally, we don't know because they do this to other people, but they could have went down to the morgue, said, "Hey, you got a cadaver in here? I'm looking for a hamstring. Okay, you got one or a calf muscle."
Well, you come to find out, they took parts from his.
He was going to take it from the latimus.
And he said no, and then they took it from another part of his.
Took it from his quadricep.
Yeah,
took a muscle and built and put. So my point is.
But I want to be a quarterback. I want to be a quarterback, guys. Come on.
Yeah, and that you owe me.
Right.
But this is where it gets weird. I still don't understand if the team was treating him that way. It has to do something with the salary cap. Because if they would have cut him, it would have somehow done something. Because what was the point? Is it he was holding the team franchise because it was going to make the team look bad if they cut this guy who was struggling to come back and he did all this stuff right?
Well, that's why we sat back and wondered. Ron Rivera's here in town, but nothing's changed out there. Nothing's changed out there. We know who was making the decision for whatever because it was PR and marketing when they desperately needed it after being crucified in the summer for the name changes, the cheerleaders, the perfect storm, sponsors fleeing pandemic.
So you can't cut Alex Smith because you'll look bad.
That's right.
But they could have.
Well, of course they could have.
Meaning could have and not really hamstrung the team from the salary cap situation.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. We said that from day one, right here back in September. It's like, what's going on here? And to think, that now, after all this has gone on, I mean, I don't know, honestly. You get into that area where I can't put myself in his shoes because to put yourself at risk the way he did this year, and to actually sign up and now sound like, I'm not done yet.
Right.
I want to go ahead and stick my chin out a little bit further. And I'm going to tell you something. You be careful what you ask for, because and it also, this kind of a situation, you don't know where to go on it. Am I supposed to criticize the fact that he has the gumption to work this hard and come back and put himself, no, you can't criticize that. That's admirable. But then when you want to insist on getting on the field and actually end up out there, now all of a sudden you're like the old saying, be careful what you ask for. Now he's back in a position where catastrophe could set in one more time. And now you're going, and I'm part of, I cheered him on, and now if he gets hurt, I'm going to feel awful. I mean, this is a quandary. If you really think it through, it's got a lot of different tentacles to it.
And let's face it, John. Everybody sat back and gave him a pass for his play on the field. He was not good. No. And here's the other thing. With the more he's come out in this article and details, and the lead is, I went 5-1 as a starter, 5-1 as a starter. This was in spite of you, okay? This wasn't because of you.
Defense.
All right? And this is like, Trent Dilfer is a Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Ravens. That was in spite of Trent Dilfer. God bless him. But that Ravens defense and the team around him. And so everybody tap danced around until towards the end as Alex kept leading and the leg was wearing down on him and couldn't finish the season. He got a free pass for his actual play last year for the feel-good story that was. And also in the article, he talks about how it starts to get more woe is me. In Kansas City, the team was awful. I'm the number one pick. Why we go to the playoffs? Right. I get hurt. Then Colin Kaepernick. Well, then I get traded to Kansas City after we got it going over in San Francisco. Kansas City was terrible. Then Andy Reid comes in and starts building us back up. Well, they want to get rid of me. I got something to prove here, and he pretty much says that there's a massive narcissistic chip on his shoulder that he's never felt good enough in justifying him being the number one, and he even says it.
Well, look, you're right. I can relate to what he's going through. When I say I can relate to it, I know that feeling for 2 years down here, it was the same thing that, hey, I think I can play better than what I'm producing here on the field. And there's other circumstances that the sports writers in this town at the time, they're great writers. They were great writers. They really were. But did they know what they were writing about? No. And the point here is that Alex Smith, I can see where he feels that way, but he also has got to reel something in here, and that is the reality that seems to elude him. Is that he's made an extremely good living doing, and unlike most quarterbacks, he ended up, like with a crash that really was debilitating for him, and took a lot out of him. But still, he played for 15 years, 16 years, whatever he's got credit for, and he's got what, Todd, $300 million that he's taken off the table.
His aggregate, I believe, is a little over $300 million.
So you kind of look at things and you go, gee whiz, in the big picture here. This is what gets insane is, people work to make a living, right? And, some people love their work. Some people could give a damn about it, but they still do it because maybe they're good at it for whatever, and it pays well. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. But you got to get to the point where you got to look yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself and say, look, my best years are behind me, well behind me. I'm in a situation now where one more hit could be a debilitating injury that actually does cost me a leg. If this leg gets injured again, God only knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And so why would somebody want to risk that whose basically financial situation is secure for the rest of his life? He's got generational wealth. If his kids don't want to, they probably won't have to work.
Yeah.
And his grandchildren. So that's where you get into why are you needing to, what is this insatiable need? Now, I get that, but at some point you got to kind of go, it's run its course. It's like the what do you call it? The prayer of serenity. Grant me the ability to, or the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the strength to change the things I can. Well, he did. He was able to bring himself back. But the inevitability of this is you're old and you're damaged, and that doesn't fly in the NFL. And if you get another chance, okay, great. But, nobody's ever going to feel good about watching you play. I don't think anybody felt good about watching him play. Even though everybody had their hearts in their throat when Aaron Donaldson jumped on his back right out of the blocks in that L.A. game. What's that?
Aaron Donald.
So I wish him well. He seemed to me that I met him one time, and he seemed like a nice enough guy and all that stuff. But there is something strange going on here. The other part of it is the very end of that article says his wife will have something, a very big voice,
she's deserving of the input for all that she's been through with him on this. And again,
I can tell you what LM would do. That the money's in the bank. Get the money. We got the money. We got the money, right? Okay, you asshole, you're out of here. Hey, coach, send number 44 over here. I need to talk to him.
The reality is, football as a business
Exactly.
and for this franchise, what was needed and necessary, it was not that last year. For the feel-good portion of it wasn't. That did not help this football team grow, get better, and otherwise.
It was a distraction in a lot of ways.
And we, why? Because it checked off boxes that needed to be checked from a positive, feel-good story for a franchise that was cratering and had nothing but bad news leading up to a start of a chaotic season. And that's where you're saying, but if you're really in charge of a football operation, and any football operation worth their salt, take the New England Patriots. Do you think they're doing this or going through this, would put up with anything like that? Because you've been a part of this, and you always tell it is a business. Forget football as family.
You can go kicking and screaming. That's your choice. But it depends on if you have any dignity. You just kind of walk out of the building and go, yeah, it was my decision. You don't want to be going,
Can you believe they didn't want a one-legged quarterback that's coming back from one of the most gruesome injuries in the history of the game? And
Well, it was, but in the sense that the injury itself was not that gruesome. What happened afterwards was. That's the way I see it. Once that infection started is when everything went off the charts. Because Joe Theismann could have had the same thing happen to him.
Yeah,
it was both of them had compound breaks.
Think about the advances in medicine. What Joe Theismann
had that happen to him, he might be a one-legged guy.
Yes.
But what I was going to say, the other part of this is that there's that part of you that you look at this and how the NFL, and they made all this big hoopla about this comeback and and I have to say this, and I do mean this to Alex Smith, and I would say to him personally, it was what you did, took I don't know if it was necessary, determination. Your determination is astounding, and you must get a tremendous credit for that. That wasn't easy to do for him. The stuff that he had to go through.
I feel good saying courageous.
Exactly. Well, I guess to have that kind of, maybe there is some courage involved in that. Well, yeah, and then at the end of this, but then's when it starts to border on, foolhardy. Is when you come back from all this.
Much better word than I was getting ready to use.
Yeah, exactly. Foolhardy. I'm sure. Because I thought about that word too, but I'm going to try and keep this as sanitary as I can. But but now to insist, and then and nobody. I mean, you watch football. People watch football because it entertains them. When you see a guy out there that, the lions, if this were in Africa and you were a wildebeest and you're walking around with a limp, those lions.
Right, you got to turn.
And that's hard to watch when you watch Animal Kingdom.
Right, you see hyenas attack a big wounded animal.
Well, how about a little baby? Whatever it is, but it's like it's not. You don't really like watching it. So you subject fans because you're that wounded wildebeest walking around out there, and it makes everybody queasy. You kind of like. And yet there's that morbid curiosity. Does he get done? I mean, I don't know from that standpoint. But the other part of this, Todd, and this speaks to a bigger issue, I think, is it kind of amazes me, and I guess it shouldn't, how the press and the sports press, they play this up, and once again it's kind of crass if you think about it. That, look what and all the courage and all this, when once again you could say that most people, if it were their daughter or their son, they would go, no, this is foolhardy. If it was in high school, no, you're not going to play football again. This injury is way too serious. You can't get out there. But because this is the sport, then all of a sudden he becomes a hero and he's celebrated throughout the land. But the real heroes that come back from being overseas, and I'm talking about the military people, nary a word is said about. It's so out of balance. The reality here is, these people were in where their death would be the price if
truly
they do,
life and death,
and they come back with their legs are missing, their arms are missing, and so we make a big deal out of this. The injuries that they have to come back from, and that they're going to deal with for the rest of their lives. Makes this look like, are you kidding me?
Well,
are you kidding me? Really?
To his credit.
This is that important that we have to make sure everybody has to go on 60 Minutes. You have to go on 30 for 30 like this is some kind of a big story. I don't see it. If you juxtapose the two occupations, I don't see it at all.
It could not agree with you more, but this is the dichotomy of this story and what he's doing, that he pretty much only came back and could come back because he trained off-site with the military. I believe it was in Texas.
Exactly, because of their experience.
And some of his best friends
the trauma.
are the guys that this is life and death. And what they taught
and
him.
what they could have instilled in him.
What was instilled into him, and just putting this in perspective, and he's like, this is only football.
It just dawned on me. Yeah, exactly. It just dawned on me. He was inspired by what he was seeing where he was working. He saw people that were so much worse off than him that he was almost shamed into coming back. I would think that's a possibility.
100%. And they treated him like,
exactly.
Who are you? I don't give a shit who you are. I don't care how much money you make or you have or whatever else. You're as messed up as we are. Screw you. I mean, it was tough love. It was as real and raw as it gets, because it really was dealing with guys that have been through the good fight.
The real fight. Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into a lot more of this because it's not going away.
Not right now.
And no, but for next,
I got to go lay down
next week, because the league's going to come down. We're going to see.
I still like my idea at the top of the show here is I think that they need to come in minority ownership of the Washington football team. They move current ownership down a notch to where they actually are they have a minority interest in the minority owned franchise.
It's going to take a straitjacket and a muzzle.
I'm wondering if you sent somebody, like from Caddyshack, if you sent Moose and Rocco out to the house, what kind of results would they get? Would they go, where do I sign? Where do I sign? Or it's like, go ahead, tough guy.
It could be Bezos with, Dan, write in a number that makes you comfortable. We're good.
Reminds me of another story that I will tell the next time. And because I said the next time, I guess that's the time for me to tell you, Riggo out.